Hi, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Glad you're here with us this evening. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Very, very glad to have people join us this afternoon, this early evening, I guess. Is that what you call the 6 o'clock hour?
I would say so.
That works. Well, we are very, very excited to kick off this program. Hello. I figured I'm just gonna spend a few minutes presenting myself, doing some logistics, and we'll take it from there. Aw. So my name is Daniela, my pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm one of the staff over at CAPS. Today's presentation is part of the kickoff events for a program that we hold called Fall Festival. Some of the rest of the programming will happen this Thursday, but this program initiated about 5 years ago, actually, with the desire to wishing to destigmatize mental health and find ways to increase equity of mental health treatment for students, particularly our students with historically oppressed identities around racial identity, gender identity, sexual identity, disability status, body size, socioeconomic status, nation of origin, and many other identities that different students hold. And with that spirit of wishing to acknowledge the various different communities and the way that mental health has been supportive, but at times has also been harmful in the past, we do want to do a brief land acknowledgement. And I know that Melody will add on to this. But this one is derived from the works of Dr. Andrea Pitts and Dr. Elizabeth Paquette. And I also want to honor the Native American Faculty and Staff Caucus who have shared their wisdom in the recent few years on our campus to eliminate some of the disparities that come with colonialism. And I'll go ahead and read this directly. But as many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this land, it is our collective responsibility to pay respect and recognize that this land is the traditional territory of the Catawba, Waxhaw, Shira, and Shigari peoples. While many descendants of the Shira, Waxhaw, and Shigari communities eventually joined the Catawba peoples, today the Catawba Nation continues to thrive as a federally recognized tribe and is located less than an hour away from our university. So let us remember the collective responsibility that we have to critically interrogate the histories, the present day patterns of settler colonialism and oppression, and the many indigenous forms of resurgence in this place. Let us learn that there's First Nations that are thriving in North Carolina and the efforts that they lead, as well as learn the history of the US from the First Nations perspective. I want to encourage us to listen to Indigenous voices. There's a lot of podcasts out there from Indigenous communities and also support Indigenous business. If you want to identify the land that you currently are settling, we can post a brief link and we'll also have a link about more information on the value of land acknowledgement. One last piece that I wanted to note around logistics is that we want to make sure that people do what they need to do to take care of themselves. If you feel like you're able to put your camera on and your video on, we would love to see your face. It's so great to be able to interact and engage, but we also recognize that some people have been exhausted by some of the Zoom and their Zoom fatigue. So please feel free to do what you need to take care of yourself. Whether it's putting cameras on and off or stretch or move your body, get yourself in a comfortable position. We would love some interaction, so you're welcome to use the chat box. We will be holding questions to the end, so if you have questions that come up in a moment, feel free to add them in the chat and we'll just make sure to address them towards the end of the presentation. We will have a survey at the end, just because feedback is really helpful for us. We'll go ahead and post that survey at the end of the presentation. If you're a student who's wishing to get credit for a class, or you want to enter a raffle that we have for a few gift cards, you can also submit that form at the end to be entered into the raffle. And now I would love to be able to introduce our presenter, Melody Lee, who is a colony-born migrant and diasporic settler of Turtle Island. They're a queer therapist of color, mental health liberation activist, and keynote speaker. They founded Inclusive Therapists, a mental health directory and community that celebrates and centers people with marginalized identities, particularly from Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer intersections. So at this point, I would really love to be able to allow Melody to share their wisdom.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Thank you, folks, for being around the circle with me. Recognize that this is a virtual circle. I'm glad you're here. Thank you to those that have bravely turned your cameras on. That helps me feel more engaged to be able to see your faces. So thank you. And for those that are needing a break from the Zoom camera thing, I understand that too. Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Daniela, for leading us in the time of land acknowledgement. And I actually prepared one, but I'm gonna move to actually just acknowledging the land that I'm on. I'm on the land of the Chumano Nation, Tonkawa Tribe, and the Coahuilticon Nation, also known as so-called Austin, Texas. And and just wanted to add a little bit on what land back means for those of you. I'm imagining land acknowledgements are not new, but I, as a diasporic settler, it's my duty and responsibility to know what the land back movement is. And so if this is newer to some of you, just wanted to share a little bit. And as we're talking about decolonizing mental health, I think decolonize is a term that it's a very powerful movement, but sometimes I think it has been watered down or also co-opted. And so wanted to kind of bring into center to remind us that decolonization is about bringing about the rematriation of Indigenous land and life. And so land back may look like restoring land stewardship to Indigenous peoples. And it's literally mean just give the land back. How much? All of it. Give all of it back. And this is a reminder from teacher Kucha Riesling-Baldi. Land back may look like getting to know and connect with local Indigenous communities. It may mean paying voluntary land taxes. And here's a link there if you want to learn more about voluntary land taxes. It means supporting Indigenous sovereignty, uplifting Indigenous voices and values in current political systems, to protect and restore health of land, water, air, and all life on land. And that could look like resisting climate change and exploitation. For example, invite us to learn about the Stop Line 3 movement that is happening right now. And it can mean supporting efforts to protect sacred sites and rematriation of cultural valuables, and also supporting Indigenous mutual aid efforts. So thank you for sharing this space with us today and allowing me to just share a little bit more about what land back means. Work with me here, technology. Before I go into an introduction on myself, I want to welcome you and remind us that this is a space for collective care. Right? You may have had a busy week, busy day. I know school is just starting. We're navigating uncertain times right now. And this is your time to come and receive care, meaning you're not here to take care of me, but we're here to take care of one another. And so in order to do that, I like to create what we call a consent-centered space or consent-centered practice. That means I like to give you as much information as possible to let you know what you're signing up for. And so this is a reminder that we're in a time of collective crisis, and that in this time together, there will be discussions of trauma that may be triggering. So I invite you to plan ways to care for yourself well throughout and after our time together. And so Daniela beautifully offered some recommendations like stretch, drink water. I'll be sipping on my tea. Hug a furry friend, or share your experience with trusted friends. Share with folks like what's showing up for you throughout this time. And this last one is important. Exercise your right of refusal. And consent means that you have the power to consent. You also have the power to refuse. And so if there's anything that I'm sharing that might be triggering, you are welcome to step away, come back and watch the recording later, or you might just simply say, I want to be doing something else, and you have a right to do that too. And part of a consent-centered practice means giving you information on who I am, and so you get to get a feel of, is this a person that I want to spend an hour with? And in the same way, I'm a therapist, and in order for service users to consent to being in a therapeutic relationship, they also deserve to know who I am. So here's a little bit about me. My name is Yinghe. I use Koi and any pronouns in English. You can find me on Instagram at Melody Hopley. I'm a Hong Konger. I'm born in a British colony. I'm a migrant, diasporic settler on Turtle Island. I embody a number of social privileges, being non-disabled, neurotypical. I have education and class background privileges, to name a few. And my paternal name means child of the tree, and my maternal name means forest. So wood is actually my element. I'm curious who else here connects with trees, forests, wood. Danielle already shared a couple of different things that I do, being a mental health liberation activist, founder of Inclusive Therapists. We like to offer resources and training on advancing mental health justice. And so this is part of what we're doing right now. So I'm really grateful that you're here. This is a photo of me and my grandmother. We call her Lulu. And I stand upon the shoulders of my grandmothers, who are just remarkably loving people. So thinking about Lulu at this time. And what else would I like to share? Part of consent is sharing with you my positionality and what my work is grounded on. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because I want to get to the heart of what we're chatting about today. So in terms of positionality, I only speak from my lived experience. I do not speak on behalf of Indigenous communities on Turtle Island or any other communities of color. My teachers are Indigenous, Black, and people of color that generously share their ancestral knowledge and lived experiences with me. So I give them credit and pay gratitude to my teachers and their ancestors. This part is important. I embody internalized coloniality, and I'm going to share more about what that means. And so I'm in the process of unlearning and healing. So that means I'm going to show up imperfectly. I'm going to make mistakes. I will take accountability and seek repair if I cause ruptures. So if I cause ruptures in this space today, I invite you to let me know or let Daniela know so that I can invite us into a repair process if that's something that you wish to do. My work is grounded on land back and Indigenous sovereignty. It is grounded on Black liberation and reparations. It is grounded on ecological futures. It's grounded on equity and liberation for all beings facing oppression, violence, exploitation, erasure, and forced displacement. My work is grounded in dismantling white, cis, hetero patriarchy. I wonder who else here is with me on this one. And also the abolition of all institutions of violence. So this is a little bit about me. I would love, I see the yes in the chat. I would love to learn a little bit about you, if you are able and willing. And how I like to do this is to talk about my favorite way to connect with culture, people, and ancestors, which is through food. So I invite you, if you're able and willing, just share with me right? To draw upon a food memory that connects you with your people, your culture, and ancestors. And I invite you to type it in the chat. What is one food that when you think about it, you can like almost smell it? It's kind of like walking into a house that is cozy and familiar to you and your people, and you go, yes, this food connects me to my people, cultures, and ancestors. I invite you to type in the chat and let me know what that is for you. Here I have a photo of mooncakes, which is something that me and my people, Hong Kongers, we eat as a celebration during Mid-Autumn Festival, which is coming up. And it's kind of a harvest festival. And that reminds me of running around with my cousins when we're little. We would light lanterns and the adults would be like sipping tea. And that's like one day of the year we get to play with fire, which is really exciting. We get to light candles and we just sit around and eat. How about for you? What are some foods that connect you with your people? And my invitation is really part of a collective care space is we get to know one another a little bit. Thank you. And we're building a potluck, basically a potluck, but bringing in your cultural story, sweet potato pie baking. I can smell the cinnamon already. Yes. Who else? Who else? Ooh, freshly. Oh, yes. Slightly burnt on edges. I love how descriptive that is. Empanadas, breakfast. Yes. Pozole, yum. Pasta and homemade meatballs, yum. Yes. Keep filling our potluck. And I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. I'm going to keep moving, but I'm going to keep looking back. Oh, yes. Comfort food. Right? Comfort food. So the reason why I want to invite us to do this too is if we're going to be talking about things that are difficult, that are challenging, and in moments when you are feeling triggered or if you are feeling uncomfortable, one way that we can come back to our bodies is thinking about these food memories, bringing it back to a space of comfort, connections with people, culture, and ancestors. And so this is something that we can do with one another, right? And so if I'm feeling triggered, I'll be thinking, oh yeah, connecting with my people through mooncakes. Yes, this really brings me back into my body. Anything maple, yeah, I feel that. Thank you for building this potluck with me. And hopefully more of y'all will continue to chime in. Gonna do a transition right now. So as we're building this spread, because we're going to talk about some harder things. When we're talking about decolonizing mental health, that means that mental health and mental health care has been impacted by colonization. And this is largely what my work is grounded on, that coloniality, capitalism, and white cis heteropatriarchal hegemony, which means kind of domination, hierarchical domination, are at the root of mental and relational distress. Today, we in this space, we are going to reclaim our wellness. And I'm gonna just briefly define what some of these words mean. But I'm talking about colonization and colonialism, and please always take note of my teachers that I credit at the bottom. When I'm talking about colonization, colonialism, this means the European invasion, occupation, exploitation, cultural domination that impacts land, thought, behavior, and life. And to that, I'll also add American invasion, right? The American colonial project, which is happening right now on this land that we're on Turtle Island. So I'm referring to colonization or colonialism. This is what I'm speaking about. There's another word that I'm going to use as well, which is coloniality. And so when I'm going to go back for a second. So when there is European or American invasion, occupation, impacting land, thought, behavior, and life, what happens when these, say, colonization, say, technically ends, like with me and my people, colonization technically ended in 1997 when the British left, but what remains is what we call coloniality, which is the monopolizing power hierarchies that are established on those land, and are oftentimes also internalized. And what I mean by that is there becomes a hierarchy of Eurocentric epistemology. Eurocentric knowledge is considered the most correct or the most valued. Eurocentric ontology, which is Eurocentric ideas of beinghood and reality, is considered the most valid. So non-Eurocentric indigenous belief systems and realities are considered less valid. And then also Eurocentric ideology, so belief systems. So I'm going to be using this terminology interchangeably: colonization, coloniality. And coloniality is upheld systemically, structurally, but also oftentimes is internalized within us, of simply thinking, yes, Eurocentric ways of being are more valid or more valuable. And what impact does that then have on our mental well-being? So some manifestations of a coloniality structurally, right, in the institutions, and also can be internalized. We embody them. Some manifestations could be gender binary, right? Dividing gender, which is such a fluid, expansive notion, into a binary. So then naturally people are going to be excluded, exploited, oppressed. Heteronormativity, sexism, racism, ableism, capitalism, which is connected to classism, individualism, believing that self-worth, self-esteem, self is a more valuable way of being, which is different from collectivism, taking care of one another, which we're going to talk more about. And also Christian centricity, which is valuing Christian belief systems and values over other belief systems. So these are some manifestations that you may be familiar with, but then how does that then impact our mental health, especially people with marginalized identities intersectionally? And this is the part that, taking care of myself, sipping my tea, may be triggering for some of us, because I'm going to talk about how this can show up in our existence. And how I'm going to talk about this is to share how coloniality impacts us on a couple of areas when it comes to space, institutions, socially, our sense of place, and our sense of being. Stages of Colonialism in Africa is an article that I invite all of us here to actually, we can Google it and it's free to read. If you're interested to learn more about colonialism and how that led to where we are now. So again, coloniality is the Eurocentric, American-centric monopolizing of power. So when it comes to space, this idea that land is a resource, that land is to be used and to be extracted from, and with extraction comes exploitation. We see that the impact that this has had at the ecological impact. And we are in, a climate crisis right now because of coloniality of space. So what happens when we're forcefully disconnected from land? as our source of life and wisdom. Rather than treating land as source of land and wisdom, we treat land as a resource. What happens and how does exploitation of land impact us? With a reminder that we are nature. So we're talking about nature. If we are nature and nature is being exploited, what happens to us? So some ways that coloniality of space can show up, can manifest in our mental and relational well-being is feelings of anxiety and depression. Anyone else feeling anxious about just ecological, you know, I don't even want to put into words, it's so painful to talk about, but what is it, the ecological, destruction. Anyone else is feeling depressed, right? Maybe feeling a sense of emptiness or despair, not feeling a sense of connection to the land, feeling removed, especially in these times when we're engaging virtually so much that we're not experiencing connection to water, to land, to trees. It can show us as boredom or restlessness. We're supposed to engage in nature because we are nature, but this deliberate disconnection can show up as I can't focus. I'm bored. I'm feeling restless. I'm feeling a lack of creativity or inspiration because nature is such a powerful inspiration. Coloniality of place. When I'm talking about coloniality of place, I mean the sense of belonging, especially for displaced people. And the sense of belonging means that it's kind of the feeling when you smell the food from the potluck, when you smell that and you go, I belong here. My full being, my story belongs here. But what happens when there's a manufactured hierarchy of race, gender, ability, and class? How does that impact our sense of belonging? Right? I'm thinking about our communities. I'm thinking about school. What about for displaced people? So how does coloniality of place impact our mental well-being? For some of us, it's fearing for safety. If I don't feel like I belong, especially if I show up in my body, in my skin, then I might fear for my personal safety. And this is something that is oftentimes persistent, right? Feeling isolation or loneliness. I don't belong in what has been created, manufactured to be dominant culture. I might feel excluded, right? Or I might exclude others. That impacts my mental well-being as well. Like I might enact exclusion or oppression or violence or gatekeep other groups. One might feel imposter syndrome. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much work I put into something, I still can't feel a sense of belonging, a sense of place. Institution coloniality. And I'm speaking with students right now. We all are navigating different institutions. When it comes to school, or some of us might be, working in institutions, that is the monopolizing of time, energy, knowledge, money. Talked about treating land as resource, but what happens when institutions treat us as human resources, that our time, energy, knowledge, lived experiences can be extracted? What happens when we prioritize production or profit over people and relationships? This for me, like, it hits really core. And I hear this a lot, especially with students that are under these demands to produce, right? And then to find that job so that they can make money, yes, to live well, but also to help these institutions profit. When that is prioritized over people and relationships, then people might feel a disconnection from intrinsic purpose. relying on institutions to tell us what our value and purpose is. We may develop a scarcity mindset that, I might, if I am in competition with others that are also pursuing productivity and profit, then yeah, I might feel like there isn't enough left for me. I might become elitist, right? Or competitive, which hurts my mental well-being. It disconnects me from community and relationships. It may show up as stress, as exhaustion, because humans are not resources to be extracted from. It can also lead to exploitation and abuse of power. I'm just kind of sharing these. We will get to what do we do about it, I promise. I have two more. Social coloniality is the monopolizing of values, relationships, and social norms. So how we relate with one another. So what happens when colonial powers define, reinforce, and police one set of values or norms, that Eurocentric or American-centric values of norms, we're told we are supposed to engage in these ways, and other ways are not okay. One way that manifests is we can become rigid or start to have binary or linear thinking this is the only way to do things, without being able to be fluid and flexible and to accommodate different realities and beliefs. This could lead to peer pressure or bullying, right? And forcing that on others. You have to be this way to fit in. You have to be this way to be accepted. We may experience rejection and disconnection. This doesn't sync up with my values. And, oh, I'm not sure, I'm on my iPad, can't see the chat. Oh, yes, thank you. I'm following now. Rejection, feeling like, okay, I feel rejected, or I might reject others, right? Remember, both of these, if I am experiencing oppression or violence, that impacts my mental health. If I enact that upon others, that also impacts my mental well-being. One might experience assimilation stress or perfectionism. Like, I have to work really hard to fit in to this box so that I'll be accepted. Can anyone else here relate with this? As I know, especially as an immigrant, I experience this a lot, that my perfectionism is very tied to social coloniality, that I had to assimilate in order to survive. Yes, thank you. And wow, that gets tiring. Lastly, coloniality of being. When we're talking about being, this is when we are engaging on intersectionality, that there's this Eurocentric, American-centric monopolizing that and a high establishment of hierarchy of gender, culture, language, spirituality. So what happens when we strive to develop our identities, right? As babies, as toddlers, as children, we are told we are developing our identities, but only within the confines of colonial institutions. How does this impact our relationship with ourselves and others? It can lead to confusion and lostness. Like, I can't quite find myself. I can't quite find a place where I can just be. Can lead to insecurity or shame, feeling shame for being who we really are, being afraid to show up as who we really are, and internalizing that as shame. This is why we need to talk about coloniality, right? Because this shame and insecurity, this confusion doesn't derive in us, that these are systems in place, right? That these are really violent institutions of power that has impacted us to feel insecurity and shame. Coloniality of being leads to intolerance, all the phobias, transphobia, homophobia, the isms, sexism, racism, you name it. And when navigating these spaces, having to survive and operate in these spaces, one might start to internalize that as self-loathing, thinking that there's something wrong with me, there's something not lovable about me. right? Which can be related to self-harm. When I really want to highlight that you are wonderful, beautiful. I am as well, just as we are. But these systems in place has been established to make us feel inadequate or lesser than. Let me see. Yes, I see a hand. Would you like to hop on? I see the hand, and then I see the hand. Maybe it's.
I think I was co-signing something you said. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the co-signing. That's really helpful for me. And then I'm seeing some resonance as well. So thank you. So for those of us, you know, I mean, coloniality impacts all of us, right? But when we are feeling, for example, shame, maybe we're feeling feelings of depression, suicidality, self-harm, society might ask, what is wrong with you? Why do you feel this way? A trauma-informed therapist, a therapist that understands how trauma impacts us, may ask for the story, which is what happened to you, as opposed to what's wrong with you. What happened to you? Here's the difference. When we're talking about decolonizing mental health, therapists for liberation will ask, what happened to you and your people? How has colonization, coloniality impacted your lineage? What is still happening right now? How are your people? How do we collaborate to seek justice, liberation, and restoration and healing for you and your people? That this isn't an individualized process. This is a collective process. How do we connect with your people's ancestral wisdoms and strengths to guide us? These are the questions I ask myself often when I'm with service users. Your anxiety and your depression is not individualized, or it is not happening in a bubble. Which leads us to a part I'm excited about, which is what do we do about it? And when we talk about decolonizing mental health, we decolonize, but what are we returning back to? We're rehumanizing, reconnecting, reclaiming, restoring, and reimagining. I will go into a little bit more detail. I'm going to skip this slide real quick, just for the sake of time. And when we are reintegrating, reconnecting, just wanted to offer a quick parallel between where we may be and where we're heading. Colonial, right, maybe human-centric, that humans are supreme and we dominate other beings, land, and although also other humans. Decolonial is land-based, that it is, we start from the ground up. We take care of nature, nature takes care of us. Colonial is individual focus, whereas decolonial is talking about the interconnection of us and all beings. Colonial is competition. Decolonial is collaboration. Colonial is power hoarding versus power sharing. Colonial is about the universe. There's one universe, one way of being, one belief system. Decolonial makes space for the pluriverse, that there are many ways of existing, many ways of being, many belief systems, and we can coexist. Colonial is capitalistic. Decolonial is spiritual, meaning that that how we relate, how we connect, what happens in between us and in between us and space and universe, for some of us creator, matters. Colonial is linear and binary. Decolonial is cyclical, that things don't happen from point A to point B, that there are cycles of season, water cycle, we notice patterns, and also it's fluid, lots of space for shifting, change, evolution. Rehumanizing. right? If you can leave with one thing today, I know y'all felt attacked by this. If you can leave with one thing, please remember, we are human, not human resources. We're not to be extracted from. How do we rehumanize? Some of it is reminding ourselves that giving ourselves permission to eat, drink, move, rest, laugh, take pleasure. Yes, even when things are difficult, especially when things are difficult, because we're not robots that are supposed to be able to navigate challenges without feeling, right? But also reminding one another. Rehumanizing is detangling worth from capitalistic outputs. This one is hard, right? Because capitalism is around all of us. This is hard for me too. But this is where we have to help one another out, right? That our worth is not connected to your grades or what you produce. So easy to forget, but we got to remind one another. It's exercising power of refusal in situations where, especially for people with marginalized identities, if we feel like we are being exploited or extracted from, we resist and simply say no, right? Setting time and energy boundaries, saying later or no. Scheduling wellness and community days. This is something that I need to do better on, right? But this is something that we got to remind one another of. Reconnecting, reclaiming, it's rooting in ancestral wisdoms, practices, and powers. Part of colonialism is this deliberate division between us and our indigenous or native practices and wisdoms. So connecting with elders, right? Getting to know your ancestors' stories of struggle, resilience, and strengths. And elders could be someone in your family. It may not be. It might be elders in your community, right? It could be, you may even read books written by elders that you feel connection with. Exploring ancestral foods, rituals, and healing practices. And this does take a little bit of research work, right? Getting to learn about how did my ancestors celebrate? How did my ancestors take care of oneself? Reclaiming healing practices that have been attempted to be erased, stigmatized, or co-opted. You and your people have ways of healing and practices that may have been shunned, or even in the mental health field being told that it's not valid. It may be told things like, oh, it's superstitious or not scientific. That is coloniality, right? Reclaiming it and say, wait, let me learn about my people's healing practices and reclaim that and say, this is ours. This is how we survived. And then also importantly, sharing with future generations. Seek out and share stories to resist erasure. And this is part of reclaiming. It's exploring your culture's their story. I don't use history because it's not history, their story, especially stories from women, queer, trans, non-binary, neurodivergent, and disabled people. And share, celebrate, amplify one another's cultural strengths, wisdoms, and practices. This could be through movies, right? Music, books, literature, theater, actively seeking out these stories and sharing them to resist attempts of erasing us. Feel free to take a screenshot. Just wanted to share some of QT BIPOC stories that I enjoy. And these are ways that I get to not only learn about me and my people, but also about people from different cultures and their ancestral practices and what their experiences are like. So I literally mean learn about them and celebrate. Reconnecting with all beings, right? Human centricism is colonial. Reconnecting with all beings is building reciprocal, restorative relationships with lands and all other than humans. Sometimes I even think about, I don't only think about plants, but I think about, what about the soil? What about the rocks, that they too are here for a reason and are deserving of care? So allowing nature to take care of us. This is one way that I love to think about it. It's being with the elements. Like we each have, elements that kind of sing to us air, fire, water, soil, wood, metal. Mine is trees, as I shared with you, but being in the elements as a way to feel restored. If we take care of nature, if nature takes care of us, we also take care of nature. Growing native plants and sustainable food, for example, protecting waterways and sources. That there's a reciprocal relationship that's built that is not extractive and exploitive. Being with animal relatives. Where are my animal relatives? Oh, they're not here right now. So play is important. I know that that can be hard sometimes when deadlines are coming up and you have assignments due, but carving out time to play is so important for mental well-being. Connecting with more than humans. That can be singing, praying, stargazing, meditating, rituals, right? Being with one another, connecting with more than humans. This is probably the part that I really hope that my field, the mental health field, will start to move into, which is shifting from self-care to community care. Is self-care important? Of course, right? That's a part of rehumanizing. But self-care alone is insufficient. No amount of self-care is going to be enough to tend to the, the coloniality related mental distress. So we have to shift towards community care, which means we find community, because our pain is interconnected, as is our healing. People that have been oppressed, our pain is interconnected. So on one hand, yes, we can feel with one another. On the other hand, we also heal with one another. So one way to do that is to share stories, find people that are trusted to share stories, and also to listen intently and to validate. And then creating restorative rituals. Like, what is something we can do that we can come together and tend to one another, cook, hike, sing, dance, read, making this a practice, a ritual, a consistent practice. Practice in collaborating and sharing. Practice receiving care while resisting guilt, right? Receiving care. Some of us here might be amazing at offering care, but also learning to receive, uplifting, advocating for, and empowering one another, which I know many of us here are already doing. And in connection to that, right, we talked about coloniality, social coloniality, tending to decolonizing our relationships. So that starts with examining internalized coloniality. How have these belief systems impacted our ways of being? And what do we need? Where are some places we need healing in? And so decolonizing relationship can mean embracing diversity in the pluriverse, embracing, celebrating different and expansive ways of being, flattening hierarchies. If there are hierarchies that exist in even parental relationships, work relationships, asking, how can we flatten the hierarchy so that it is an equitable space where there's collaboration over competition? And creative and creating that intentionally. And then seeking repair when ruptures occur using restorative justice or non-punitive models. I can, do a whole chat just on that. But when ruptures occur, how do we tend to the rupture that has occurred? How do we invite in a restorative process? But if this is something that interests you, I invite you to look up restorative justice and to learn more about that. And there are awesome Instagram accounts that talk about that. So this is what we're really talking about, right? When we're talking about decolonizing mental health, we're talking about reimagining mental health care. And these are some of the ways that I've shared on: mutual aid, community, being with nature, pleasurable movement, expressing oneself, seasonal rituals, thank you. Food and water as collective medicine. We gotta protect food, water, land collectively. Reclaiming our healing practices. And advocacy, activism, and abolition of institutions of violence. Wanted to share a couple of resources with us. For those that are thinking, can I do some further reading? These are some books that I recommend: Self-Love Revolution, Guide to Black Mental Health, Racial Healing Handbook. There's also more in inclusivetherapist.com/resources. If you would like to read more, you're so welcome. Feel free to take screenshots of everything here. And also wanted to share some resources on places to, to seek out mental health care, such as your school counseling center, right? Learning about insurance and sliding, yeah, I know, learning about insurance and sliding scale. These are questions to ask, right? If you're on an insurance panel, maybe some of you might be connected to insurance with parent or guardian, or you might actively ask for sliding scale, saying, this is what I can afford in therapy. This is what is affordable to me. Advocate for yourself, right? Get this knowledge and advocate for yourself and one another. For some of us, individual therapy might not be might not be, of course, is not the only way, but it also might not be the way that you like to engage. So you can also explore into therapy or process groups as a way to receive care. Find out about collective care events such as meditation, movement, films, dance, music, right? Shared a couple books, workbooks, podcasts, the list of, Instagram pages that often share about collective care and mental health resources that I recommend. So those are some places to find more resources, your elders and your peers. I'm moving quickly, y'all, because I want to, spend some time with questions if you have any. Please take a screenshot here. These are some mental health directories and communities that I recommend, especially for folks with marginalized or minoritized identities. And I'll make this available to Daniela later if you're wanting to get this. And then some therapy funds for Black, Indigenous, and people of color if you're wanting some financial support for therapy. Here we're here. And this is a summary, a very quick synopsis of ways to decolonize our mental health and to honor our intersectional identities. I invite you to stay connected. These are some ways to do that. Oh, if it's okay, I would love to hear from some of y'all. If there are questions, then I invite you to hop on, or if you have questions, you're welcome to, raise your hand. I'd love to engage with you. I'm happy to stay, 5-10 minutes after the hour if you want to just hang out and chat. Daniela, do we have questions from folks? And feel free to type in the chat too, if you would like. These are some ways to stay connected. Things that you might want to share with me, things you're curious about, things you would like me to clarify or expand on. If there's anything that particularly resonated with you, I would also love to hear. Oh, yes. I wanted to hear about the concept of receiving care and trying to fight against the guilt that is there. Yes, so much so. The guilt associated with receiving care can stem from a lot of places, right? Could be connected to coloniality, this idea that we are to produce, we don't receive, right? We're human resources. Or some of it can be actually connected to maybe our cultures of origin. Some of it could be if we are from collectivist cultures, we may have been taught things such as we have to prioritize others before ourselves. So this can originate from a lot of different places. Receiving care is a practice, which means that we're flattening the hierarchy when we receive care, that you are deserving of care equally to me being deserving of care. And releasing guilt is really to honor ourselves equally as honoring someone else. So if you're feeling guilty to receive care, first of all, you are not alone. Second of all, I invite you to talk about it, right? Sometimes just being reassured by others and allowing others to know that this is something you struggle with can be helpful. But this is a practice for me too, honestly, and it gets with practice it gets easier over time, but I'm inviting you to trying to identify, where is that guilt coming from? How does that show up in your body? Can you talk about it? As you talk about it, what are you finding out? Are there areas of healing that you may want to pursue? So thank you for that question. Can I talk about what we might keep from the digital world, even connection-wise, as we transition back? Not back to normal, when the protection has been needed for many communities. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name well, Jenica. I want to understand. This is a complex question.
Mhm.
Hi, thanks for hopping on. Would you be willing
Hi.
to? Thank you. Would you be willing to actually read the question to me? So I think hearing the tone of voice always helps me.
Yes. So maybe about decolonizing back, coming back to normal, which has been a big push. And I'm faculty at the university, but this idea of like coming back when normal did not look like health and wellness for many communities. So maybe even some of the connection that we keep without like throw all the things that have kept us together, the past however long. So.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, back to normal is normal was not working, right? Normal is not sustainable. A lot of us are hurting in normal. And for some of us, the digital world actually may be relieving, especially people that may experience exclusion, for example, or oppression or fear of violence. So when it comes to returning back to normal, yeah, I'm curious with your communities, how your communities are tending to one another during this time. What are some ways that, are there particular ways that your community is needing to show up together? I don't have an answer. Like, I think this is a big answer that we need to figure out as a community. But what are some things that, what are some things that this time has taught us? What are some valuable lessons that we can share with one another and ways of being that we want to keep? And what are some things that we might say, this is no longer serving us, we need to shed? So much, yes, these are such important conversations to have. And this is a question now I'm asking myself. And also, what are ways that normal is not serving us, that we may need to put pressure and advocate and say, we can't return to that way of being. But there's power in community, there's power in collectivism. Make your voices heard, especially in institutions, that you are the ones with the power here to ask for change. I'm not sure if that helps. Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing the resonance here. Yeah, feeling guilty about asking for help. You are certainly not alone. Asking for help with disabilities, especially with mobility. Thank you so much for sharing. I just have, I'm feeling tender. And also the fact that there's collectively we're experience that reminds me that this is not an individualized experience. That if even in this time together, that some of you are already voicing that up, right? So connect with one another. And we have the power to advocate for, to encourage one another, and also to ask for help. Like literally say, I feel guilty for asking for this, and I'm going to do it anyways. And this is sometimes what I need to tell myself, that I'm allowed to feel guilty, but I'm doing it anyways. I'm voicing up anyways. And over time, our brains will rewire that yes, there's a signal of guilt, but that signal is now connected with advocating for my needs. And over time, our brains rewire. This is neuroplasticity. We have the power to to shift, especially when that's reinforced by community. So thank you so much for sharing. Oh, yes. Receiving your gratitude. If it's okay, Daniela, would it be okay if I stop sharing the screen? Thank you. Just want to hop on. And for those of you that have to go, I totally understand. Just want to thank you for being with us. And I hope to see you again. Stay connected. You're welcome to connect with me on social media. And for those that want to stick around, I will be here for a couple more minutes. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for being with us. My honor, my pleasure. Thank you for building a potluck with me. Now I'm thinking about what are the yummy foods of of you and your people that I want to connect with as well. Hello. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to be here. Anyone else? You're welcome to hop on. Hop on, say hi. If you have a question, comment, curiosity, feel free to do so. Thank you for being here.
I was gonna well, actually, you know something, I'll chat with that afterwards.
Oh, what a lovely group. Feeling so honored to be here. I see that Sarah is still here, Emilio is still here with us.
I think we're gonna stop recording. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great.